I call Julian Ginta.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koutou e te whare. The Prime Minister, in his statement, claimed that there were 4 priorities of his government, and that policy and legislation would reflect these priorities. The first 2 priorities, responsibly managing the government's finances and building a more competitive and productive economy, unfortunately, are being directly undermined by the actual policies that this government is pursuing. In his speech, John Key mentioned his government's inexplicable commitment to spending billions and billions of dollars on a few expensive motorways that do not get much value for every dollar spent and will have no positive impact on our economy, certainly will not lead to it being more productive. How is this good financial management? It is not. Take the Ministry of Transport's own advice to the Minister. Now, this was written in 2013 in the preparation of the government policy statement on transport funding. It wasn't released to us under the OIA until very late last year after the election, just before Christmas. What it shows very clearly is that everything the Green Party has been saying for the past few years is true. It backs up exactly what we've been saying. It shows that over the past decade, demand for roads has declined considerably. That people getting to work, especially in our largest cities, are increasingly choosing to take public transport, walk and cycle, even though our walking and cycling conditions are very unsafe, even though our buses and train services are of a much poorer standard and much more expensive than overseas. Imagine if the government actually invested in proper public transport and made it affordable, how many people would take it? We would not have any congestion. The evidence shows that rail freight grew considerably over the past few years, while road freight declined considerably. And the evidence shows that local roads carry many more vehicles than state highways. And despite all of these very clear trends, National shifted money away from local roads, away from capital investment in public transport, away from rail and sea freight, even though all of these areas and modes have much greater value for money and they have increasing demand from all sectors, private and public. So they're not only better for productivity and the economy, they are better for the climate, they reduce costs for government, they reduce costs for households and businesses. But National, supposedly good fiscal managers, instead shifted hundreds of millions of dollars a year into a few expensive gold-plated motorways, and they're actually increasing borrowing for some of these projects, so we'll be paying it back for decades to come. Another policy the Prime Minister signaled in his speech is the wholesale attack on the Resource Management Act. Now, this is our world-leading environmental protection law. I know New Zealanders, like myself, love our wild places, love our wild beaches, forests, green spaces in and around our towns and cities. All of these places will be under threat if the government's radical proposals to change our law succeed. Now, the alleged purpose of the changes is to create affordable housing. This is absolute rubbish. The purpose and principles of the Resource Management Act, the RMA, have nothing to do with the supply of places to live. Let's just make that very, very clear. The purpose and principles have nothing to do with the supply of housing. Now, there are unhelpful rules in district plans, which existed prior to the Resource Management Act. In fact, I spent most of my career before I came into Parliament trying to raise awareness with this particular government about some of those unhelpful rules, which they were completely uninterested in dealing with. And what those unhelpful rules do, they're rules in district plans, they have nothing to do with the purpose and principles. There are rules in district plans that largely prevent the supply of apartments in inner city suburbs, which is where the market is demanding that new dwellings be built, and they're not being built. Now, instead of this government showing leadership with the actual tools that already exist under the RMA, like national policy statements and national environmental standards, they are looking at gutting the law itself, because the truth is they don't care about affordable housing. If National cared about affordable housing, they would introduce better protection for tenants. They would limit the sale of property to residents and citizens and stem the flood of foreign money coming in, inflating our local housing market. They would introduce a capital gains tax to rectify the perverse incentive to invest in property instead of the productive sector of the economy. And most of all, they would build more places to live. And in particular, they would build high-quality apartments and townhouses in the inner suburbs of Auckland, and they would invest in high-quality public transport like the City Rail Link, which they are holding up and which is desperately needed, and the rest of the congestion-free network, which the Green Party supports and would build, and we know we have the money to do it. So the government's taking none of the fiscally and economically responsible options that are available to them that would not only help the economy, but would address climate change and reduce inequality, which are the priorities of the Green Party. We will continue to offer positive, practical, proven solutions, even though this government will continue to ignore them, I suspect.
Mr. Speaker.
This is a split call between the National Party and the Maori Party. I call the Honourable Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.